It's showtime.
People should not be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people.
You know, the right to bear arms is because that's the last form of defense against tyranny.
Washington is fundamentally corrupt. There are more words in the IRS code than there are in the Bible.
Made in America, heard round the world. You're listening to Blunt Force Truth. I'm Chuck Woolery, along with my co-host Mark Young. And the government shutdown, it's the end of the world.
Chuck, I was just about to check on you. I know. Well, it's just because it's so dramatic. I was about to check in with you to see if you were still alive because, you know, people are going to die.
It's touch and go like it was the last 22 times.
Well, think about how many people died from net neutrality.
Oh, my gosh.
And then there was all the people that died from the Paris Accord.
It is like there's not enough going on in the world. We have to worry about government shutdowns where 25% of the government who, how would you like to be known as a non-essential employee?
Shouldn't that be called laid off employee?
Yes, like no laid off, like, you know, fired employee, non-essential. We don't need you. So you go home and stay there and find another job. Here's
the point. Anything that's important is happening. Leave it shut down.
Everybody knows it except people who don't pay attention. There's nothing really shut down. Unless the president targets things like Obama targeted. Remember when he targeted when all the
World War II monument?
Yeah. I mean, who does that? That was like mean.
But remember this, you and I actually reached out to the White House when that happened, and we offered to pay the salaries for those workers, and they rejected us.
Yeah. No.
If you remember, Bill O'Reilly jumped in with us and said he would share it with us.
Right. Yeah, back in the day.
And they turned us down because what we were trying to do, if you remember, they were bringing the World War II honor flights in. Right. These 95-year-old guys are coming in for the last hope in their life to see the monument. Exactly. And they spent more money putting barricades up to reject them than they would have to let them see the monument because it's an open-air monument.
Well, on top of that, you know how much the Democrats love the military. They just love it because they take pictures with it and they talk about how important it is and they defund it. And
it was horrible. So you were at the White House Christmas party.
I was at the White House Christmas party and I had a great time other than I was physically a wreck, but I had a good time. I had head-butted the wall at the Trump International and the wall won.
Now, is that just something that people do when they go to Trump Towers? They run their heads into the walls? Or?
I got up and stumbled over an ottoman and literally put all 230 pounds right on my head into the wall. I mean, I
thought maybe you were protesting the hotel and tried to take it down.
Hotel, by the way. It's beautiful. It's absolutely.
The Trump hotels are wonderful, aren't they?
And our room, for what it cost tonight, was fabulous. It was really, really nice. So anyway, I did that and then banged my hip when I did that. So I had a hard time walking and we wanted to go to the Smithsonian. It was the day of the party. And so we went around and went to the Smithsonian. Kristen literally had to put me in a wheelchair. It was so embarrassing.
Now there's probably people on Twitter saying, Chuck Woolery's in a wheelchair.
Really? She was wheeling me around, in the wheelchair. And so then I came back and I was sitting on the toilet for some reason. I don't know why. I wasn't going to the toilet, just sitting on it. And I had my shoes off, obviously, and she had just taken a shower. And there was like, a half-inch water on the floor, but I didn't know it because you couldn't see it on the marble floor. So I stood up and both feet came out from under me and I whacked my back. I had bruises up and down my back. I broke the seat of the toilet. I hit the same hip again, and then I went to the party.
Now this happened at Trump Hotel.
I thought I was going to die. Yeah.
It sounds to me like this is an impeachable offense.
Yeah, well, I figured they probably charged me for the toilet seat because it literally came off the hinges and flew up the wall. It was not a pretty sight. So anyway.
So I know that you did some predictions in your minutes this week.
Oh, what did I predict? I
forget. You predicted that the Democrats are going to squander the next 2 years and not do any legislation, and they're going to spend it all trying to impeach the president.
This is great. Think about it, though. No legislation for the next 2 years. Fabulous. But they will do nothing but just absolutely, every time Congress goes into legislation, and this is how they're noted. We pass this bill, we pass that bill, and everything else. Think about it, folks. Every bill they pass takes just that much liberty away from you. every single time they go into session.
I hope Nancy Pelosi does spend the next session
Yeah.
trying to impeach the president, because they can't impeach him.
No.
They will never get past the Senate, but it will probably take the gavel from her away in 2020.
Well, it should. I mean, if people have any brains at all, and I'm sure they do, the House will be reclaimed by the Republicans in 2020, unless something I don't know unforeseeable happens. But the thing of it is that, you know, between Jerry Nadler and all of these guys who are taking over positions, they want to nail Trump any way they possibly can. The whole thing, this whole Mueller investigation, all of this stuff, it's all about how can we get rid of Donald Trump. And there's so many Republicans in on it, like Paul Ryan was in on it. Everybody praises Mitch McConnell, but literally the only thing Mitch McConnell has done is provide a support for the judiciary. Other than that, he hadn't done anything, and he's not going to do anything. He will not have a vote on this wall because Mitch McConnell doesn't want to expose the Republicans who are against it, because a lot of them are against it. And I'll tell you why. If it were not for the donors to the Republican Party that don't want that wall and want cheap labor, they'd be pouring concrete right now. End of story.
I want to get your thought on this. You've spent time in Washington. We both have. We both know a lot of people in this arena.
Yeah.
Both parties and all of Washington is filled with corrupt individuals.
Well, they're filled with statists, what they are. They're filled with progressives. I was listening this morning to so many, well, over the week of so many commentators, and I won't mention their names, but they're people you and I like. And they talk about the progressive base of the Democrat Party as if it was some kind of small group over in the corner with Alexandria.
Yeah, Ocasio-Cortez.
Well, I mean, it's like she is like the progressive base. Well, I got news for you. In 2012, Hillary Clinton said, "I'm not a liberal, I'm a progressive." They're all progressives, and the ones in the Republican Party are progressives as well. They are all for the state. They're all for government. They're all for their jobs. They could care less about the American people. And that's just true. And I think we all are beginning to see that.
Well, here's my point. Rarely do politicians in D.C. ever actually go after another corrupt politician.
No.
They protect corrupt politicians.
They do.
When you see the amount of effort that is being spent to get rid of Donald Trump, use your freaking head. It's not because he's corrupt. It's because he's going to expose the corruption. Well,
it's not even corruption, Mark. At least, I mean, I know that that's there. That's a foundation for a lot of people who work in Washington. But let's not corrupt the language.
Well, I say corruption, but I think trying to turn the country socialist is corrupt.
Well, it is, because it's an antithesis to the Constitution, and we all know that. And you know, the Constitution has been trashed and thrown around by the Democrats and some Republicans as well. But anyway, here's my point: people go to Washington in the Senate and in Congress to create problems. They don't go there to solve them. They go there to create them, and they run on them. Time. How long has this immigration battle been going on? 50 years, 60 years? I can remember talking about it on Prager radio when I filled in for him in Los Angeles 25, 30 years ago. So it's been going on forever. It'll never stop. So they run on this over and over and over again. Trump comes in. Here's the difference. Trump is a problem solver. We've talked about this ad infinitum on this show, but he's a problem solver. He is literally the opposite of everyone in Washington. They don't want the problem solved. They want to talk about them and never solve them. And they don't want him to solve them, because if he solves them, what are they going to run on? What can they complain about?
They've got nothing to run on at that point.
Exactly. So they don't want anything to do with him. He's doing exactly what we hire them to do, and they never do it. They just talk about it. Or they'll do it in little increments where they say, well, look what we did here. It amounts to nothing. Let's have comprehensive this and comprehensive that. That's the worst word you can hear coming out of a politician's mouth, is comprehensive health care, comprehensive whatever. And it's just a complication a mess.
Yeah, the word comprehensive. Well, it's no different than, we know about them bastardizing the language, and that goes back a long way.
Oh my gosh! Please.
You listen to Kamala Harris now saying President Trump is an unindicted co-conspirator in multiple felons. There is no such term.
Well, there's no legal term for
correct
co-conspirator. There's obviously, it's a made-up term, and it doesn't mean anything.
So, Chuck, we have with us today on Blunt Force Truth none other than James O'Keefe from Project Veritas, which you and I are both really big fans of. So, James, welcome to Blunt Force Truth.
Yeah.
It's great to be with you guys. Thank you.
Well, it's nice to have you. So, what are you working on lately? I know you've been working on Planned Parenthood and Acorn and all those things in the past. Is there anything in particular that your group is working on now? And you probably, because of all the publicity that you've gotten, are so recognizable now that you can't do these things anymore. You have to have other people do them, right?
Well, people tend to think that I'm the one who does them all, but we have a great team. We're growing in numbers. I'm actually more of like the director these days. I don't actually put the hidden camera on myself, but Veritas, the recent work we've done in the elections in November and October really had an impact on the different Senate races. We exposed Gillum, and his staffer. We exposed Beto O'Rourke's people paying for migrant caravans. And then we did the deep state investigations in the federal government, the Department of Justice official scanning license plates, and targeting conservatives, IRS officials admitting to targeting conservatives. We even got this guy in the State Department to say that he's a resistor. So Veritas' whole mission is to do more of what we've already done. But to do that, we have to kind of build an army. So our mission and what we're doing next is we're growing this army of undercovers and just trying to hire and train as many full-time reporters as possible. We're building something that's never really been built before, which is a citizen army of patriots who can film these things behind closed doors. And that's what we're working on right now.
Well, James, who covers this stuff? Now, obviously, we see it on Fox News, but how does the rest of the media respond to your work? I mean, because, and here's the part that, I'm going to add this to it. It's a hidden camera work. It's just the facts are the facts. This is what's recorded.
It's political candid camera.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it's the irrefutability of the video that makes it so unique. I mean, there isn't any debate. There's nothing to argue over. The facts are not up for debate because it's on video. And images tend to transfix in a way that words don't. So when we are investigative journalists, but what makes the work so special is that the people are on the video. You can see them talking, and oftentimes with video and audio, you can kind of get a much richer story than if it was just two-dimensional, than if it was just a newspaper article. So yeah, I mean, it's really unique. And I think the reason why people don't do it, other than the fact that it's really expensive and you get sued a lot, we get sued all the time, not for because we've done anything wrong, is because a lot of people don't want people to see the truth. They don't want government to be exposed because it tends to show that the emperor has no clothes. It tends to show that policies, and many of these are left-wing policies, don't actually work. It lends to graft and corruption and waste and abuse, the sorts of things that are anathema to people who want to live in a free society. So we're just trying to do more of what we already do. Many people don't necessarily know that we're the ones behind these videos, and I think another thing that worth saying is, you mentioned, where do people see it? Our mission is not to speak to the echo chamber. If it isn't in the New York Times, it does not exist, according to people like in New York.
Other than Fox News, do we see your stuff on MSNBC or CNN or NBC?
Yes, we do. And one of the biggest outlets you see it, I know that's a question people always ask is, where do we actually see this stuff? Does it make an impact? And I would submit to you that the work that we do at Veritas is actually more leveraged than any other form of media. I mean, if you look at most conservative organizations speak to the echo chamber. That is, they have an audience that listens and watches them, and that's it. Yeah. Our work, we try to get it on local media mostly. We try to get it on local NBC, CBS affiliates, and that's really something conservative. You guys still there?
Yes. Mm-hmm. You said
Yeah, so that's hard work, though. I mean, there's 210 TV markets in the country, so you guys are literally working market by market to get stuff out.
Well, in a state like Texas, that's a pretty massive local television. But the whole vision. Let's just talk about the big picture before we get into all of that. When people buy ads for political elections, they purchase an advertisement on a local media station, and that will go in between a news break. So what Veritas does is we expose these people. The people get fired because they're on tape doing bad things. And the local media is forced to, not just one station, but many, many stations. And in the Gillum race, this is a guy in Gillum's election who was a college roommate of Gillum, the guy running for governor in Florida. He was on tape saying, well, our policies are all fairy tales and we're just saying it to get elected. That was covered in the New York Times. That was covered in Politico. So getting the mainstream media to, getting the mainstream media to report these things is obviously what your audience wants to happen. But I think conservatives are afraid to do this because when you do this, you get attacked, you get vitriol, you get flack when you're over the target. It's really a question of political willpower and the willingness to get attacked, to be called bad names. We don't make any money doing this. It's not like we're monetizing this. So I think for a lot of reasons, economic, political, fear, most people just don't do the investigative journalism work and they don't want to play into the hands of the mainstream media. But that's really what you got to do. You got to get covered by the mainstream media.
I think your work, and I'm down in Florida today, I think your work here in Florida helped defeat Gillum. What you exposed down here.
I think there was a confluence of events, and there was a number of things that happened, but I think but not for our work, we were one of a couple different variables. And in the 2016 election, we got this guy named Bob Creamer on video and his associate, and they were talking about inciting violence at Trump rallies, and we were talking about laundering the money or taking the money from Hillary Clinton and passing it through this group and passing it to this group in order to stir up violence. And they said that. I mean, but not for that, Trump may not be president. That was mentioned in the debates, and it was in the A section of the New York Times. But I think the most important thing we're talking about right now is getting mainstream media to talk about these issues. And what does that require? And I know of no other way than actual investigative reporting. If you do investigative reporting and you get it on video, it forces them to talk about these issues because it is irrefutable in a way that words just aren't.
Well, you're right. Of course, we know that they obstruct any kind of truth coming out because they just avoid it. They just don't want to talk about it. And if you put it in front of their nose enough places and enough times, it becomes a story and it catches fire. They have to do it. And so I guess you could do that locally until it becomes nationally, which is basically what you did. And we're very successful at it. And so, yeah, there you go. I get that. And hats off to you, boy, because you're basically you're really doing the job of Congress.
Yeah, and the
real job of the media.
Well, listen, I think you're touching on something, guys. This is a cultural war. It's a war of information by other means. Andrew Breitbart was my mentor, and he taught me that politics is downstream from the culture. You have to fight the war of information. It's not a political war because politicians only derive their power from an informed citizenry. And that consent from the people, where do the people get their information? I mean, people aren't firsthand witnesses to what's going on. They have to get the information from the media. Right. I suppose social media gives them information, but those companies are now, Google and Facebook are now adjusting their algorithms so that you don't see stuff they don't want you to see. So really, this is a war of information. It's a culture war. And I wish more people on the right understood that. I think people on the right just focus on elections and then just sort of go about their way. And people on the left don't sleep. They're self-sacrificial. They oftentimes give up their lives for the cause. And they understand this is a war of culture. So you have to play in the culture. And the only way that, if you have a different idea, please let me know. The only way you can actually get into the New York Times is to put out information that is itself manifestly damning, irrefutable, undeniable, and to keep going on offense, and to keep pushing and pushing and fighting, and the war of price of liberty is eternal vigilance. That's what we do. And
I'm going to ask you a question that everybody asks, but you may have a different take on this. So it's my question of this is to you. Why do you think it is that by and large, the Republican Party, especially in Washington, I'm talking about the elite Republican Party, who are leaders, don't mix it up with the press? I mean, they just will not do it. They want them to love them. They never will, but they constantly just fold and fold and fold and apologize. Why do you think that is?
Yep. That is the question. That is my favorite question, and I've got an answer for you. I think it's what Dinesh D'Souza told me, which he said, they fear the humiliating power of the press. They fear it. So listen, everyone wants to be loved. I want to be loved. You want to be loved. We all like to be liked, right? That's what life's about, being liked. If you play this game, if you fight the good fight, if you stand for truth, justice, equality before the law, these sorts of virtues that have made America great, you are going to be attacked. And I'm not just saying they'll call you ugly. They'll try to put you in jail. We live in these times where there is no justice. Our justice system is has become so political. It's become weaponized. It hurts. And I myself have been to jail. I don't know if you know that. Like, I've been arrested and falsely accused because I exposed Acorn and I asked the wrong question of a senator. But the point is, people don't want to be hated, and the media has so much power. There's a famous speech by a guy named Solzhenitsyn. He gave this Harvard address in 1978. He was a dissident of the Soviet Union, and he said that the media in America has more power than all three branches of government, but they have none of the responsibility to tell the truth. And in the Soviet Union, which is maybe what we're turning into one day, everyone knew that the media was called Pravda. Everyone knew that it was a lie. All the people knew it was bogus, but they were too afraid to speak up, because if they spoke up, they'd be sent off to the gulags. They'd be killed. And I think you're seeing this sort of lack of moral courage in our leadership in Washington. These people don't want to fight the media because they know that they buy ink by the barrel and they'll be attacked. So there has to be this awakening in the United States. There has to be this cultural awakening where everyone realizes the media is a lie, and I'm willing to take the flack for standing up for that to them.
Well, there
needs to be a moral courage. It's
voice too. Milton Friedman, who was one of my favorite people, was talking about the responsibility of the Great Depression, and he proved in no uncertain terms to a room full of bankers who didn't believe it that the Fed was responsible for it. And he said, because he'd read all of this stuff, he said the problem with government and private industry is private industry has no voice. It has no PR department. The government is nothing but a giant PR department. So the Fed can say anything they want to say, get away with it, and it's not true. But they can, and it's the same thing with the rest of the government. They can do and say anything they want to as long as they got the backing of the mainstream media. It seems like it must be the truth when, in fact, most of it is totally misleading. Some is deceptive, and people just hang on to that and say, well, that's the way it is. In fact, it's not the way it is at all. And so projects like
Chuck, the Democrats have the media.
Yeah, and that
is their PR department.
This whole liberal kind of, and I go back to this whole liberal Marxist progressive kind of thing. I mean, Marx knew the media was very important. The guy in Italy, I can't think of, Giovanni Giantelli, he believed the media was important. He's the father of fascism, which nobody knows his name. I almost forgot it myself. They think that Mussolini was the father of it. It was Giantelli Giovanni. So anyway, they know how important the media is, and that's where they really do their work, because that's the information that gets out to the people. The founding fathers, as you said, James, so well put, better than I will, that an uninformed public obviously can't make knowledgeable, informed decisions if they don't have the information. You've got to have the information. And as long as that's been completely dulled and completely, falsified with, as Trump puts it, fake news, which most of it is, even coming from our beloved Fox in some ways, it's really, really tough. And so a project like yours...
Well, Chuck, you know how much abuse we take.
I'm sorry?
I was going to say, think about the amount of abuse that we take doing Blunt Force Truth, and then multiply that by probably what James is getting hit with. I'd like to introduce you to a new type of podcast. And by new, I mean there's never been anything like this before, not in terms of scope or ambition. The show's called Living Beyond 120. Science proved that lifespan could exceed 120 years back in the 1960s. And the Bible first mentioned living to 120 years 6,000 years ago in the book of Genesis. But the question is, how do we get there? Living Beyond 120 tries to answer this question. The show is an exploration into human longevity and what it will take for us to live longer, healthier lives, featuring interviews with some of the most respected minds in longevity science and tackling big subjects like how the medical system, big pharma, and maybe even our own government don't want you to live longer. Living Beyond 120. It's hosted by me and my co-host, medical expert, Dr. Jeffrey Gladden. You'll find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast directory, and you can also listen to it at the website livingbeyond120.com.
I was going to say that the Blunt Force Truth is a very well way of putting this. It's almost like I've read a book called Propaganda by Edwin Bernays and Manufacturing Consent by Noam Chomsky, and there's this guy named Walter Lippmann who came up with this idea of what they call a stereotype. A lot of these people 100 years ago, who the kind of founders of modern media and mainstream media, they believed that the people were too stupid to have the blunt force truth. In other words, you had to compress information and summarize information. You had to create these stereotypes. And then you turn to modern media. The problem with mainstream media is none of these people care about truth. They care about generating a profit. They care about ratings. They care about ratings, and they'll say anything to get the ratings, even if it's not true. And that's the case with CNN with the Russia. They say Russia 10,000 times because they're trying to give their audience what they want. And it all comes back to this idea that the people are not smart enough to be given the raw, unfiltered information. So I believe that our vision, our mission is so important because if you give people the raw, unfiltered visual, that is to say reality, if you just show people the truth, if you just literally film government, film what these people say behind closed doors, go inside Google and film the engineers. If you just it'll be like a great awakening because they'll suddenly see the light. They'll see how people behave and what their motivations are. We did a hidden camera expose of CNN a year ago, and you saw the producer saying, "Oh, it's all crap. We know it's not true, but we're just trying to make money." I mean, people were outraged. We just need to do more of that.
Right. Yeah. Well, of course, senators, congressmen, people in government are the same way. They don't really want you to know what's going on. If you knew what was going on, I said at the top of the show, Mark and I were talking, and you didn't hear this, James, but I said these guys go to Congress and they create problems. And then they talk about them and run on them forever. They never want to solve them. They all say, this solution, that solution, it's comprehensive this and comprehensive that. Nothing ever gets solved because they don't want to solve it. They want to run on it.
That's right.
And Trump comes in, who is nothing but primarily a problem solver. It's what he does. It's his whole makeup is I can take this problem, I can figure it out, and I can solve it. Well, he is totally an antithesis to what our government is. They despise him for it.
Yep, it's the same thing in the political movements in Washington. Whether you're a nonprofit, an NGO, it's like when we did the Acorn thing with Andrew Breitbart. Maybe your audience remembers the pimp and prostitute going into Acorn, and they were telling me how to disguise the profits. And it made the Jay Leno show. It made South Park. Congress defunded Acorn with these hidden camera videos showing these Acorn workers telling us how to disguise the money and declare child hookers as dependents on our 1099s. It was an unbelievable set of
right.
investigative videos. But most people want to. They don't want to solve they don't want to. In that case, Congress defunded Acorn, and Democrats signed the legislation. It was an extraordinary series of events. I can't even think the Republicans can do something like that. And what it came down to was you forced their hand. But the problem that I've seen, and again, I'm going to call out the conservatives here more than I am the left, because
we do it every day.
I think that all it takes for the triumph of evil is for good men to not do the right thing.
Right.
And so I'm not going to criticize the left. I'm actually going to criticize conservatives, because the problem is with conservatives is that the same issue. A lot of these organizations, you have to be willing to take the flack. You have to be willing to be called bad names by the people in media. And in the final analysis, most people just want to be liked. They want a comfortable life. And if you want to fight the good fight, and if you want to expose corruption, and if you want to change the world, you're going to be hated.
Well, look what's happened to Bill Kristol and Stephen Hayes, who I liked, and Jonah Goldberg, who I kind of liked. All of these never-Trumpers who were quote-unquote conservatives at the Weekly Standard. I mean, look at this. It's insane. He's accomplishing things that they've worked their lifetime for, but because it's him, they don't want any part of it. It's just nuts.
Well, I mean, like I said, I can't speak to the motivations of each individual, but generally speaking, Rush Limbaugh said this too. He said, we grow up to be liked and loved. But when you realize being hated is a sign of respect, that's what that really is. I was in federal jail in Louisiana for a crime I didn't commit, and I was eventually vindicated. But I learned that these guys respect me so much that they would do that to me. And Andrew Breitbart even said to me when my mugshot was on the front page of the New York Times, he goes, "James, they're turning into a folk hero. They are weaponizing you in the same way they weaponized a Sarah Palin." And frankly, the conservatives are doing it to Ocasio-Cortez. This freshman congressman from New York. I actually think she's authentic. I don't agree with her policies. I think her policies will lead us to Venezuela. But why are they attacking her so much? They're weaponizing her, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Well, she is that progressive wing, which is coming out of colleges and universities today with her economics degree. It knows nothing about economics.
She is a nonstop source of good humor, though. You have to admit. I mean,
that's true.
When she said she was going to get to Congress and walk all three chambers of Congress, that's hard to pass up.
Yeah.
So, James, you're at the very heart of the First Amendment and taking the heat for this stuff. And again, I think Chuck and I have already passed the wanting to be like thing, because, now he's a crazed, washed up game show host and I'm his lunatic sidekick. So
I just don't even care anymore.
So at any rate, tell us some of the stuff that you've had to go through. I mean, you've been arrested. On what charges, and how are people suing you for the First Amendment? I mean, this makes no sense.
Well, that's an interesting question, and it would require. I don't know how much time we have here, but I'll try to give it in a concise way as possible, because it was I wrote a whole book about it. It was called Breakthrough: My Guerrilla War to Expose Fraud and Save Democracy. This is a 2013 book I released. I was falsely accused in Louisiana. I went into a federal building. I said that I was I basically was undercover, but I went into this building. I showed my real ID at the door, showed my real driver's license. And I went into a senator's office, sat on a couch. This is a door, a public building, open to the public, broad daylight, middle of the morning. Anyone can walk into these government offices if you show your real driver's license, which I did. And my colleagues were with me. They were wearing reflecting vests, basically trying to say, "Hey, are your phones working?" They were hoping that people would assume they were some type of telephone technician. They had no tools on them at all. But we were trying to get an admission from the Senator Landrieu's staffers in Louisiana that they were ignoring thetheir constituents, which wouldn't be a huge story, but it would be interesting. I mean, for them to say, "Yeah, we just shut the phones down so that the Tea Party people can't get in touch with us." And while doing this, we were completely compromised they realized that we were not, in fact, telephone technicians. And they basically charged us with this felony we didn't commit. They said that we were trying to destroy government property, which is preposterous.
Jeez.
But they had me pinched. They had me arrested, and when they realized who I was, they were going to let me go. But then they said, "Oh, you're that guy who did the Acorn thing. Let's charge you with a felony." So I spent 3 years on federal probation. I eventually pled guilty to a misdemeanor, entering this building using false pretenses. I did not enter using false pretenses, but what the government tends to do, and this is what Mueller is doing so very well, is he gets you kind of wrapped up and overcharges you, gets you afraid, and basically makes you lie and to save yourself. Makes you and I'll never do it again. I'll never lie on behalf of the government.
You know, this is a perfect example of Cohen. What they got Cohen on with Lanny Davis. Lanny Davis of all people being his
right. Well, this is like what happened to Dinesh D'Souza too. Remember?
Yeah, but this thing.
Yeah.
Here's what it is. Cohen has now pleaded to a crime that isn't a crime, and he did it on 2 counts because, you know, Lanny Davis told him to do it. So he implicated Trump in a crime that isn't a crime. And of course, all over the airwaves, all you hear is campaign finance, when in fact it's not campaign finance. What am I trying to say? It's not against the campaign finance rules. And it's just insane what they do and how they get away with it over and over again. And without the press, they just...
Well, I think the Jerome Corsi, I think it was Jerome Corsi who basically said to Mueller, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, "I will not lie for you.
Right.
I will not bear false witness and plead to something I didn't do to save my ass, save my skin."
Yeah.
And he's suing Mueller.
The problem is that I don't know how many people have actually experienced this, but when you're interrogated by the FBI, I mean, you want to piss your pants. I mean, it's not a pleasant experience. I mean, I went to law school for a year. I consider myself not an idiot who has common sense. When you're in shackles and those guys are cross-examining you, and we'll put you in jail for 50 years, blah 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 blah. We got Martha Stewart on lying to the FBI. You don't think rationally. You think, I'll do anything to get myself out of this situation.
Exactly.
So in our case, in my case, I didn't even know what the hell I was signing. I was so in like a traumatic situation in a federal holding cell with these 2 agents who were so clearly political in their relationship with Senator Landrieu. I wrote a whole book about this. I mean, it literally fills up an entire book. The Senator Landrieu's guys all resigned in disgrace. They apparently leaked information to the media. It is so politicized. People actually think that there's justice in our justice system. It is a completely politicized system.
Right.
In the same way that the Soviet Union's justice system, they called it telephone justice, where the judge calls up a member of the party and says, "Should I thumbs up or thumbs down against this guy?" And the party would say thumbs down. Okay, let me find a crime to charge you with. That is not justice. Justice is treating everyone equally before the law. Everyone should. If Mueller wants to put everyone in a room for 20 hours. If they put you and I in a room for 20 hours, they'd find something. They would get us on an inconsistent statement. So I've lived
off of a
through
mattress. Cutting one of those
they
tags
just
off
get
of a
you
mattress.
on.
I mean, anything.
You say if you talk to the FBI enough, they will find you on an inconsistent statement, not because you intended to lie, but because you just accidentally said something inconsistent with something you said 6 hours ago.
So we have contacts in the
justice.
show in the FBI.
Mark knows this story, but I have a friend of mine who had a little deal with the IRS, and he couldn't tell me about it because he said, "I don't want you implicated." So they went to 3 different states and won every time. Okay? Now the federal guys came to him and said, "Well, we've only got 47 states to go. They will absolutely drain your pockets and beat you up if you don't do what they want you to do." And people don't realize this. It's stunning when you are firsthand in a situation where the Justice Department comes after you, the FBI or the IRS. I mean, their funds are unlimited. They've got so many attorneys and investigators.
Yes, but I'll tell you something. Chuck, I'll tell you something they fear more than anything else I've learned. And it's the same thing. I keep going back to this Solzhenitsyn guy who my intellectual hero, is he says, if you cannot give them an inch, he would say, go to your left, lose your conscience. Go to your right, lose your life. In other words, sell your brothers out and to save yourself, and you'll lose everything. You can't get the one thing they fear is you saying, I don't fear you. So when I say to the government or these people suing me, when they want all this money to settle all these lawsuits, I say, go to hell. I'm not giving you $1. I'm not lying. I'm not going to bear false witness to save myself. I'll happily go to trial. It's the same thing General Motors did in the early 80s when the insurance companies, when they got sued so many times. It was a business decision. They said, I'm not going to settle a lawsuit ever and most people just don't want to put up with it. But where we can win is if.
Well, you said something was very interesting, very telling, and you just swept right by it. And it's key, I think. And that is go to trial. President Trump and all of these people will not go to trial. They're all allegations, and this whole report that's being built and this whole thing that's being, worked out with Mueller and all this kind of stuff, none of it will go to trial. None of it will be adjudicated. It will just be, we did this, and you did that, and you plead guilty to it, and that's the end of it. So, I mean, if Flynn went to trial, he probably would walk out within an hour and a half, but he's scared to death to do it because he didn't want to, probably
it cost him another $500,000 in legal fees to go to trial.
So that's the box they put you in. They will never take you to trial.
Have you heard anything about, and I know this is a little off subject, have you heard anything about the Russian catering company that challenged Mueller?
Say that again?
So there was a Russian catering company that Mueller indicted, and they actually showed up in court to challenge it, and Mueller was trying to get out of it. And best I can see, they actually dropped the charges against them now that it was challenged.
Yes. There it is. That's a great example of what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are probably many examples you don't hear about. I mean, people, if you simply fight back, I mean, I don't know how else to put it, except it's very pithy. You say today, go to hell. I mean, if you simply just say those words.
You have to have the money to fight back, though. That's the problem. I mean,
well, you don't necessarily. I mean, listen. Yes and no. I mean, you have to have the more. Let's first say what's more rare than money: moral courage. You have to have the moral courage to say, I will not plead guilty to something I did not do. I mean, I'm going to take it on a 30,000 foot level here because they've come after me. I haven't lied. When I pled guilty to something I didn't do. Or how about the Acorn investigation, where I settled a lawsuit for invasion of privacy because because it was a nuisance to me, and I didn't want to deal with this issue. But the truth is, this is what they do. They use litigation as a weapon. They're using the Justice Department and litigation. I call it litigation in my case. Mueller hasn't come after me, not yet.
Not yet.
But
right.
They're using lawsuits as coercion. So what they want you to say what you just said. I can't afford this. I'm stopping.
Right.
But there has to be a way. Where there's a will, there's a way. If you keep going, we crowdsource fund, or a third of our budget's legal. Third of our budget. Imagine that. Our financials are all public information. We're a multi-million-dollar nonprofit organization. We spend 33% of our time paying lawyers to fight lawsuits. But if there's a will, there's a way. When the Washington Post came after me a year ago, tried to silence me and shut me down, tried to call my donors and say, why are you supporting this guy? He's a fraud. He's a huckster. He's trying to plant false stories. All of it was false. But you know that our donors actually doubled down when they got those calls trying to boycott us? They actually gave twice the money. So if you have integrity, and this is what my message to your audience, if you have integrity and you stand for the right thing and you don't back down, good things, historically speaking, tend to happen. When you do back down and you say, I've had enough, I'm quitting, I'm settling, bad things tend to happen. The left tends to get more empowered by that. And you mentioned that example with Mueller. I'm sure there are others where they've dropped it when people fought back.
But you have to be willing to go through the fire to get to the other side.
Yeah.
That's what I've been talking about this whole time. And I honestly think that there's the rub, as Shakespeare would say. I think that is the issue, not the money or this thing or that thing. It comes down to one thing, and that's people's willingness to be hated by the people in the culture. Because the truth is that people don't want to be hated. They want to be successful in the eyes of all of the people that they claim to have no respect for. They want their book to be a New York Times bestseller. They want this, they want that. They want to be loved. They want to be respected, blah, blah, blah. The list goes on. And the truth is, you're going to be absolutely despised by everyone.
When it comes to these people, I would rather be feared than loved by them.
Well, from your words to God's ears, but I wish the people in the conservative movement would agree with that.
And I think they do fear you, James O'Keefe. They do fear you. What can our audience do to support you, to get involved with you?
I have one other question.
Sure, Chuck. Go ahead.
Let me ask him this one thing. Of all the people in journalism, who do you most respect? Are there some people out there in journalism that you absolutely have great respect for?
So that's a great question, and I will answer it, and I'm going to say this. I think journalism is an activity, not an identity. I think that journalism, it's gotten so bad with, I'm a journalist, you're not a journalist. That's their argument against me. So in answering your question, I would say there is no individual that I can point to. I would say there are behaviors that I can point to. And I think that there are people in the media. I mean, I think Ronan Farrow, he does the Me Too movement stuff. I don't agree with everything he done. I think he messed up with the Kavanaugh stuff. I think he got his facts wrong on that. But there are behaviors that people demonstrate. And I think that I have to go back decades to find real journalists. You have to go back to almost the days of the muckrakers who had no fear and would do anything to get to the truth. And I don't think there really are a lot of examples of people today who do real investigative reporting. I think Bob Woodward is a guy who people say, oh, he's the legend. Well, the problem with him is that he uses hearsay. He quotes people not exactly. The people are anonymously sourced, quoting other people. So I think that a lot of today's journalism draws on a bank account of credibility they don't have to make us believe them without actually showing us the primary source information. So I would have to go back to Upton Sinclair and Mike Wallace and the Chicago Sun-Times and people in the 50s and 60s and 70s who actually did the sort of work that needed to be done. I don't see a lot of journalism happening today.
What do you think of somebody like Mike Moore?
I'm sorry, Mark, I stepped on your...
No problem. I say, what do you think of somebody like Michael Moore?
I have some of the things
his slant for a minute, but his approach.
I liked Roger and Me, the one he did in 1989 about General Motors. Not talking about his policy views. I'm talking about
the work.
Simply the cinema verite, where he would film the witnesses and talking about the impact on the community. I thought there is journalism in that. I think the problem with again, going back to the issue is people moralize the news. Their job is supposed to document important facts, but they're injecting their moral opinion too much into the issues. And where Michael Moore succeeded with Roger and Me is I think he documented the impact these plant closings had in the community. I think he documented that well. But it's no longer about documenting facts, guys. It's about injecting and virtue signaling. And when's the last time you ever saw CNN report on any problem with border insecurity? They simply don't report facts. There's no facts. It's all opinion.
There's only one
in Veritas's case, in our case, it's all facts, no opinion. I don't inject my opinion into my reports. I simply, my job is to go, hello, everyone, check this out. That's what I say. And then I play the videotape. And I think Michael Moore did that with Roger and Me.
There's only one person that I have great respect for, and it's grown over the last year because I started paying attention to her, and that's Cheryl Atkinson.
Now, she does a good job. She's actually a great example of someone who's done a better job. And I noticed that she does not insert her opinion into her reporting.
Never does. Never does. And she's got a little show that's on, I don't know where it's on, but I think it's on local stations like CBS and ABC. They're syndicated throughout the country. But I happen to watch her every Sunday, and I'm always very impressed on how deep she goes into things, the information that she gets. And she's one of the few people that I know that literally does journalism today, as we used to know it.
And there are aspects of journalism in even the people that we hate. The New York Times does, in fact, do journalism, but sometimes it's monolithic, and it only focuses on one set of facts. But I think Jake Tapper, I thought he used to do good work, but he's just become so.
Well, they're all ideologues now, and she's not. That's my point, is that everybody else is an ideologue, and they're doing it from their political position. She's just one of those people out there who tells the story. And like you do. You're just telling the story.
Well, he's letting other people tell the story, if you think about it. I mean, how pure can
what I do is I put the people in their own words. I mean, I'm very biased. I'm very, very biased towards what we do, because I think it's the only, investigative journalism. There's a book by a guy named, I think his name is Etema, and he wrote a book called Investigative Journalism and the Public Virtue. And he said journalists are custodians of conscience. He calls them custodians of conscience, because through fact finding, they test and affirm what is and what is not an outrage to the people. Because it's really about building moral consensus. I mean, we crossed the border dressed like Osama bin Laden. I dressed up like a terrorist and crossed the Rio Grande River and undetected. And a lot of people on the left were looking at that going, that's outrageous. In other words, I was convincing people who were not supporting building a wall. I was showing them something so outrageous that it actually appealed to everyone's sense of right and wrong. That is what a journalist is supposed to do. Not inject their moral opinion, but expose facts themselves that speak to something. And that's what a journalist, in my opinion, is supposed to do.
Well, every show you
and I didn't say
all of these cable networks is I'm better than you are. That's really what it comes from. I'm morally superior to you because this is what I believe.
That's it. That you said it. That's a very good summary. I'm morally superior to you. And been great in the last 24 hours. You know what happened? Trump went to Iraq to the troops. So that the media got it all wrong. They said this guy's not going to visit the troops. So Trump was on his way to visit the troops while they were tweeting that. What the media should have done is said, we apologize. We were wrong. The media doubled down and said, well, he didn't visit the troops in the right way. He's handing out MAGA hats. They're so morally, they're so full of hubris, and there's no introspection, and they're so on their high horse. That is the problem with present day media, and it can be solved in an instant if they just focused on fact finding and in a way that's irrefutable. That's why we use video, because there's no debating it. It is real. It is cinema verite. It is truth. And I think the truth is like a law without, it tends to speak for itself. As St. Augustine said, the truth is the most powerful force. And I believe that it's its own best advocate. You don't need to inject your opinion. You simply need to report facts and let be what is.
Well, James O'Keefe, we really appreciate you. We thank you so much for joining us today. And Mark had a question about how people can be
absolutely. How can our listeners support you, get involved? What can they do?
Well, the number one thing that we need are recruits. If you're listening to this program and you're like, wow, this is appealing to me, I can see myself strapping a camera to my chest and going into the local government office to expose fraud, I would say that you go to the Project Veritas website. That's Project Veritas. That's Project Veritas.com. And there's a sign-up page where you can apply to work. Some of you actually work inside the government or work inside Silicon Valley companies, or maybe you're a school teacher or a janitor at a company doing inappropriate things and you want to expose these things. You can actually work for your country. You can be a hero. You can be a patriot. You can document it. And if you're worried about what's going to happen to you if you do that, we have resources. We can defend you. You can work for us, but I'm not asking for everyone to do it. I'm asking for a few good citizens who care enough about their country to make a difference. So projectveritas.com, sign up, wear a camera. We will fight for you. We will train you. We will put you to work.
Now, I'm going to volunteer to put Chuck Woolery out on the street.
No, you can't do it because everybody knows who I am. But here's the word that came to me that I thought everybody wishes they could do this. Everybody wishes they were James Bond. Everybody wishes they were that spy. People can actually be spies, and for all the right reasons, if they just join Project Veritas and work for you. And I think that's awesome.
Now, if they don't want to work for you, what else can they do? Can they donate money to your cause?
I would say there's 3 different ways to be a patriot here. I mean, and by the way, we're not the only or the only way that you can make a difference. I mean, there are many ways in life to, you can run for office, you can join the service, you can work for various nonprofit organizations. But in this case, you can donate to Project Veritas. You can sign up to be an actual journalist and go through that process, or you can share our stories. I mean, simply send our stories out. I mean, post them to Facebook and Twitter. That is one of the most incredible ways to make a difference. Is
so
just
what are you on
share
Twitter?
Our stories.
What are you on Twitter? What's your handle?
James O'Keefe, like my last name is spelled Okeefe, Roman numeral 3. That's James O'Keefe, III on Twitter. I got 500,000 Twitter followers. I'm not verified, which is laughable, but Jack Dorsey doesn't think that I'm a real person.
Mark got me verified, and he can't get himself verified.
I know.
Not 500,000 people do.
Well, James, if you would follow us both on Twitter, Chuck Woolery, and I'm at Mark Young Truth. Follow us both. We'll make sure that we start repeating all your stuff and start retweeting it. And
I'm the one that can't spell.
Right. Well, that's how people know when Chuck doesn't put a tweet out when it's
That's how they know it's really me.
Yeah, that's when they know that our PR people did the posting. But I'll tell you what, anything we can do to help you, our audience is open to you, the podcast, our website, our social media. You let us know anything we can do to help you. And so, folks, if you go to bluntforcetruth.com, you'll find links to James' website where you can sign up, where you can donate. We'll have links to his social media. And watch the social media for Chuck Woolery and myself on Twitter. James, follow us on there. We'll start retweeting your materials and get it out to our 500,000 followers also.
Yep.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, James O'Keefe. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thanks, everybody. Project Veritas, James O'Keefe.
So there it is, Chuck, James O'Keefe.
It's you really have to admire him to take on a project like this. And I'm sure that, I guess he did this right out of college. I didn't ask him, but I think he did. And it takes a lot of guts. You're not going to make a fortune, that's for sure. And my hat's off to him. I mean, it's very patriotic.
No, people like him and Laura Loomer take a lot of abuse.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, they do.
I mean, you know how much we get, so you can imagine how much they're getting.
More, probably much more.
Absolutely. Life-threatening, potentially.
Well, it's good to sit down and talk with you again, my friend, and good to talk to James O'Keefe, and it's good to talk to our audience we love, and we hope that you'll give us a good review on iTunes and Stitcher. And
don't forget to go to bluntforcetruth.com every day for the news.
Yes, and we'll see you next time on Blunt Force Truth.